I think I'm saying that we struggle all our lives to answer it. But it's the struggle that is important. That's what helps us to define our place in the universe.
This is Beverly, Dr. Beverly Crusher.
Look where we are. Here, all of us in this moment. So let's do what we spent our entire lives learning to be great at.
And this is Crusher Convo.
All right, and welcome to Crusher Convo, where we're crushing the conversation one episode at a time. I am very excited about today because I have Rob here from the band, the Beverly Crushers, and we're going to talk about their new album and all about Star Trek. So thank you, Rob, for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me on, Jesse.
Awesome. So before I actually get started with our questions here, I do want to mention my sponsor. So on mycherrytree.com, you could use my code of CrusherConvo6 to get 6% off your order. They have amazing Borg cube computers. They have little figurines of cats on Borg cubes, whatever you need with Borgs. Like, just, if you're a Borg fan, this is the place to go. All right. They also have Klingon keyboards. So it really spices up your office and your computer with Star Trek. And also I just actually got my my husband a shirt. They also do shirts and it says, I'd rather be at Quark's bar. So it's perfect. It's perfect. But wanted to mention that. So first off, tell the listeners about you and your bandmates and, what even inspired you to start this band.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, I am a longtime fan of Star Trek, particularly The Next Generation. I watched it with my entire family when it was on in prime time growing up, and I always thought it was just a really terrific version of the show, very philosophical, great storylines, great characters, all this stuff. And at the same time, I've always been a musician. All through my teens and 20s, I was playing in bands, I was writing songs, I was singing, producing music. And at some point, a few friends of mine who had similar experiences with the show and with music just decided, hey, this would be a really fun project to kind of try to get inside the heads of some of the characters, expand upon the world, do a little world building, if you will, and right. Leverage some of the little inside jokes that we had personally traded about Star Trek, the things we find interesting, thinking of the Enterprise as a workplace. And so we just set about writing songs and had a ton of fun with it. And so, yeah, it's just something from lifelong musicians who are just having a bit of fun and expressing their love for the show.
So this actually is a good little segue because this brings up, I had asked you what your favorite song was of your new album, which is called Enterprise, as that was part of the album cover right there in the beginning of this. And you mentioned this song. So I have a little 30-second clip.
I want to love, I want to feel, to step into a crowd and disappear. Let it take a hold of me. A holographic fantasy. It's better than reality.
I giggled when I was listening to your album. I was like, and Will Riker. And I was thinking of all the different things that happened in the holodeck. And
Sure.
But the line where it was all like, leaving reality, right? You just want to escape. You don't want to.
Yeah.
They die almost every day. They're like, I need a moment. Shout out to my friend of Holodeck 4 who does amazing memes and jokes.
Oh, I love that account. Yeah, that's so great.
She is awesome. Yes,
so good.
She is a friend of mine, and she, Holodeck 4, that was where Riker went. And that's actually one of your songs from your list.
It is. That's actually, so the true genesis of the band, I didn't know how deep you wanted to get right off the bat, was
Let's go for it.
What a lot of it was that Holodeck 4 joke. So I think for a long time as a songwriter, I had a one idea in my head, which was to write a love song from Wesley Crusher to Picard, his father figure, called Make It So. And I had never really written it. And I got together with this buddy of mine and I was like, yeah, let's just go ahead and let's do it. Let's use that as a writing prompt. And he immediately wrote the song Holodeck 4, which I assume you're referring to the episode The Perfect Mate, where Riker gets all hot and bothered talking to Famke Janssen and pings his communicator and says, if you need me, I'll be in Holodeck 4. The clearest reference to the holodeck as some kind of sexual, fantasy place, which they go deeper into Deep Space Nine and beyond, of course. But yeah, that always cracked us up. We always joked about that kind of through our lives. And so it was exciting to get to put that in a song.
Yeah. No, I mean, there was always this little, you also do a lot of Barclay as well. And I feel like, of course, he had a holodeck addiction. And he definitely had that anxiety. And he kind of represented a lot of people, in my opinion. Just, he's really good at his job. High anxiety, always questioning everything, and then of course needed to go to therapy to handle his issues, but he used the holodeck as his escape. He's all like, he even told Geordi, he was just like, it's my only way of just being able to to be myself, just to kind of just relax and just stop with the stress and everything. As much as Riker wasn't too fond about how he was doing it, that's still self-care, Riker. I'm sorry.
It is. No, I think the holodeck is one of the most exciting things. It's one of the most exciting topics that Next Generation came up with, if you will, because it really is a metaphor for the internet, right? And I've always thought of Barclay, the character, he's a great character, as a little bit of a stand-in for the Star Trek fan. He's on the Enterprise, but he's kind of in awe of the characters, the main characters. He's a little bit awkward. He's a little bit unsure of his place. And so where does he go to escape? He goes to the place where he's anonymous and he's in control and he can kind of format things, which is the holodeck. So yeah, I thought that was a really cool character to explore. As you're implying, we have 2 Barclay themed songs on this particular album called Enterprise. And, as listeners may have picked up on, we're sometimes a little jokey, but more importantly, what I think is the most entertaining thing for me is to take a little bit of a silly concept and to treat it with dead seriousness. And that's sort of what we've attempted to do here, is try to get into some of the emotional underpinnings of what's going on in these characters' minds and the situations they incur. And, what's the aftermath of those situations, right? So the holodeck, in this clip you played, Holographic Fantasy, that song is kind of about how the holodeck is general wish fulfillment for everyone in the crew. And they're using it for different things. Riker is using it to maybe take the captain's chair and things like that. And Data is using it to pretend to be human. And Geordi's using it to pretend he doesn't stand out because he's disabled, things like that.
Yeah. I think that's also a thing of why as podcasters talk about Star Trek, we there are a lot of silly episodes and some of the concepts are a little bit too much, but we peel back those layers and it really exposes it of what philosophical meaning can we see behind this, right?
Absolutely.
I am a big defender of Sub Rosa. If you ever do a Sub Rosa song, that's going to be my theme. The next album. The thing is that everyone jokes about it, right? Obviously, for obvious reasons why they joke about it. But I see it as Beverly Crusher just being a hero in her own sense of being manipulated and abused by an alien. And she fought back and she saved Geordi and Data and Picard. And in a sense, she also saved herself. So I see it a very poetic in a sense of just her being this, a character everyone looks up to, but it's also showing that she's human. She fell for something that most people fall for, especially doctors do become addicts, unfortunately. And,
of course.
And that's what I saw. So as much as people can make jokes about it, I try to see the bigger picture behind it, which I think is what you do a lot with your songs. You're kind of bringing out that bigger picture for different things. I know you've done a few about Guinan, as much as stuff like that.
I really do think of course, I really believe the show is terrific, and I'll fully admit I don't know every single fact about Star Trek, which I know a lot of. This community really favors a deep level of knowledge about the show, and I respect that. That's not exactly me, but I do think that Next Generation in particular is this potential great bridge into the world. Because like you said, it's so character driven. It's so philosophical. And I think it was just so ahead of its time. So to me, it still really holds up. And you're right, even when they get a little more silly. I mean, let me just say something else about my philosophy, which is if you're a huge fan of something and you don't see what there is to make fun of about it, I don't think you've thought about it enough. Like everything has a little bit of that component to it. Every artist, every, that's just a part of life. And that doesn't mean you're tearing it down. That just means that there's peaks and valleys and there's things that worked and didn't work.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I was actually kind of curious. We kind of jumped in with Star Trek, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
But what kind of type of music are you into? Do you have favorite band, musicians, things like that?
Yeah, of course. I would say very generally, the whole record is a love letter to the 1970s, which is where a lot of my musical taste is centered. I grew up on classic rock, which was my parents' generation of music. So the Beatles, of course, Pink Floyd was really directly being referenced in the clip you played, I think. And other 70s rock bands, Thin Lizzy, and you can just rattle them off, Big Star. So I appreciate, in particular, I think about music. I like music from all decades, but we picked a lot of genres from the 70s to kind of aim at with the Beverly Crushers, because we all really like that music a lot. And what I like in particular is the level of production from that time period. And what I really mean by that is just layers of things where my friends and I often call it headphone music, meaning that you're kind of only going to get some of the little Easter eggy details of what's going on if you're listening intently on headphones. To me, that's just what speaks to me as a musician from any era.
Oh yeah. I was born in the 80s and I'm a 90s kid, but man, the 80s, that's music. In my opinion, I could play that. It's just because my mom, the moment I was born, she's playing all these, vinyls, right?
Are we talking new wave? Are we talking hair metal? What are we talking about here?
She was all over the place. I think my mom was one that really exposed me to different types of genre, like Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston. We definitely played like Dirty Dancing, Footloose, like going off on all of that. I remember one of my favorite songs was Paula Abdul's Cold Hearted Snake.
Oh.
And I loved that song because of the instruments, the strings and all that with the hip hop. And I'm all like, this is great. Like this is music. And
totally. I mean, listen, confession time. It's not the coolest thing to say, but literally the first piece of music I ever bought for myself was Paula Abdul's Forever Your Girl, which has Cold Hearted Snake on it.
We're now friends. We're really friends now. Like you've stolen my heart there. No, and I remember just thinking back about how cool the sound of a vinyl and just how cool the artwork was. Like Michael Jackson's Thriller, he was laying across with like the tiger, and I'm all like, this is great. So, but it's so different now. And I think one of the things that I enjoy about your type of music with these albums is that you are paying homage to those old school, like you said, the 70s and even the 80s of some sort. So that's always good to do. My husband's a huge music buff. Like I'll play any song and he'll know what it is. Like he's just into music, and that's his downtime. After he works, he's a manager at a hotel. I'm a housekeeping manager. He puts on those headphones and he's just zenning out for hours before he goes to bed. And music speaks to people. And so you've kind of done a really cool mesh between music and Star Trek, which is what also speaks to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's coming from a place of love on both levels. Music has been with me my whole life, right? Since I was a young kid, listening to it, playing it, writing it, recording it. It's a passion project. And maybe this is self-evident, but I am not a professional musician. I'm an amateur musician who has a career besides, and so are all my bandmates, but we're just really passionate about it. We've worked really hard to get good at it. And so we treat it with not over self-seriousness or anything, but just a certain level of reverence and experience. And we want to do right by it musically and in homage to the show and to get it to the community. And really the only goal is for more people to hear it. I think that's just a really fun challenge in the modern era. It is hard, by the way, to get people
Yes.
to listen, to sit down and have the attention span to care about an indie band, which we are. So that's really the only goal. That's why I'm here, is just hopefully more people in the community get to hear something and actually enjoy it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm curious though, why did you name the band the Beverly Crushers?
Yeah. Couple reasons. I think, well, let me start by saying I have a younger sister who has bright red hair, and
Perfect.
Beverly Crusher was always her favorite character, and she dressed as her as Halloween and things like
Nice.
that. So she was always kind of, it reminds me of my sister to a certain extent. And I think the other reason is we liked the idea of a little bit of a gender swap, because we are all men in the band.
Yeah.
And so that was just like a funny thing to us. Also, the idea that the word crusher has like a heaviness to it, and then Beverly kind of softens it up. I liked those two things. And, of course, the character herself. I always thought, if I'm being really honest, Beverly Crusher's the woman on the show I had a crush on, as opposed to Troy. I just thought I thought she was really cool, and I liked her character, and I did like those aspects of character development they did with her on the show.
Nice. So when I started watching The Next Generation just a few years ago, I remember I was on YouTube and I was just looking up clips and things like that, or interviews, like just trying to really get to know the actors and that. And your band actually popped up. I was like, there's a Beverly Crusher band? What? So I listened, because your other album was called Sick Bay.
Yes.
And I listened to it. I was like, oh, this is great. I was all like, people love this character, because sometimes you kind of feel alone when you're loving a character, right? Because in a lot of aspects, I think for especially the women characters between Beverly, Troy, especially Tasha, weren't utilized as great as the men character, the male characters were.
Definitely.
So, it's always good to see fans pay homage to those characters, because we feel that, the Berman era and those producers and stuff didn't really do it very well. So I was excited and I saw that.
No, that's great. Absolutely. And I should have said the last thing is that I studied science. I studied biology. And so I feel like kinship. I'm not a doctor, but I feel a kinship with that area of expertise.
I mean, people forget she was also a scientist, not just a doctor. So yes, that's
Heck
awesome.
Yeah.
So of course, as we could tell, your songs are strictly The Next Generation, but would you do songs about the other shows like Deep Space Nine or Voyager?
Yeah, I'm not certainly not against it. That might be a little offshoot sister band. I should say one other thing is that because the band we're in is a little bit geographically dispersed, and we all have careers and families now. We're not doing this professionally. We actually don't play together that often. So primarily this has been a recording project and a really cool way to stay connected with musical friends that are a little distant. And then we'll get together for a weekend in the studio. We'll do some stuff. So ideally I'd like this to keep going forever. And one thing is, meaning like Deep Space Nine offshoots sound like a great idea to me. Let's get into it. Endor, Picard, Endor, any other of the shows I think are fair game. What I've noticed about creativity, though, is that it's very helpful to constrain yourself and just say, hey, these are the limitations that we're going to self-impose. It has to be about this topic. It has to be within this world, and within that, then the challenge is to find something interesting to say, an emotional, something that feels universal about the emotions. I mean, again, I'm not trying to inflate it to more than it is. It's just a band and we just write songs. But I do try when I'm writing a song to crack into something that I think is real and that I can personally relate to as well.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I watched The Next Generation back to back. Like I was just like constant replaying after I had seen it. But then as I had decided to start the podcast, I was like, oh, I should probably watch the other shows.
Yeah.
I should probably see what they're about. And they're all different. Like none of them I could say is similar to what we saw in TNG. Definitely Deep Space Nine is its own game, right? And then even Voyager, it does play a little bit to the TNG just because of the Borg and all that stuff. But I like how it is connected in some way. They're vastly different shows, but they're connected and people can take a little bit of each and discover just who they are and how they could better themselves as a person and stuff like that. I am going to want you to just pick a random episode, and I'm going to look it
Ooh.
up and see.
Okay, well, I'll say one of my personal faves is Tapestry.
Oh,
Right, the one where Picard goes back and has a chance to change his past.
yeah. So that one is season 6, correct?
Hmm.
I believe. Nearing the end of 6, I think.
All
Let me
right,
see
it
here.
says
That's time
6:15. 6:15, yeah.
6:15. All right. Whew. I'm glad I got. At least I knew the season. Okay. Sometimes they kind of the 6th and 7th season for some reason blends together, so I tend to get a little.
They were on a roll.
confused. They were. I think season 5 though is my favorite. Haha! Here it is. Tapestry. There we go. Let me see here. See here. But the premise behind Q's first tale since the pilot, whose title did not include his name, had murky roots. No one could remember the source of the near-death white light premise, especially after one pro with the similar old pitch passed on the claim. It was not until after the show aired that a heartbroken and disillusioned letter arrived from James Mooring, who had actually pitched the exact same idea from submitting a spec script. Because at the time, a lot of fans were submitting scripts to, get used.
Yeah.
With the first season story credits disputed, ironically unknown to this staff, they immediately set out to settle up and make amends. I talked to him, Ron talked to him, Jerry Taylor said, and they paid him. He was very happy. So clearly they took an idea from somebody and weren't giving him the credit. So I'm glad that they fixed that. He was very happy.
I was going to say right off the bat, that's them being good people. I mean, whether it was correct or not, like the fact that they just settled it that way, at least as that text suggested, is nice to hear about.
It says all he wanted was acknowledgement, and we apologized profusely. I hope it has restored his faith in our integrity, because we would never do anything like that intentionally.
It's one of the things.
That's a deep one.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's one of the things Star Trek has done so darn well over the years, is they've minded the community. And I think that sometimes in the modern era, people might forget. Right? Is it safe to say that Star Trek fandom is kind of the basis for nerd culture generally today, which has now become this huge explosion of everything, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we always talk about there's so many fandoms out there, and I understand. And I come from Star Wars fandom, which is not the most positive of fandoms. It's very hard to even just have a conversation with another fan, because all of a sudden you get in an argument. And the one thing that I learned about Star Trek fans, though, is that you may disagree, but there's always 85-90% of the time it's like, well, let's talk about it. Let's see your point of view, my point of view. Sometimes you might change that point of view. You might figure something out, might even bring up something they never thought of. So it's always nice to see that collaboration with other fans of just loving so many different aspects of the Star Trek franchise. And I also kind of noticed that with Doctor Who. I think Doctor Who, it being first, I will give the credit. It was first,
Yeah, fair enough,
1963 or something like that. Even though they had a rough patch with the old Who and new, they're still very passionate fans, and they still all understand each other and why they like certain things and certain doctors. And, just like you'll ask, like, who's your captain? They would ask, who's your doctor? Right. So, I think probably both those franchises really is what set this this path for just how, like you said, how nerd culture is today. And I think sometimes Star Wars gets the credit, but it was already paved, and it just had a faster train.
Well, I think I read it because the original show went off the air in like 69 or 68 or something, pretty early. And then it was a long wait until they actually made the first Star Trek movie. And I'm pretty sure that was based on the success of Star Wars. They're like, actually, this fan community's, it's gotten bigger in the time the show's been off the air, and maybe this can work. And Star Wars let them know that maybe it could work. And obviously it did. But the other thing I was going to bring up, I know that's I also enjoy Star Wars, of course. And I understand that's anecdotal, what you said about how the fans maybe treat each other in those universes. But
Right.
one of the things I think is funny about and makes Star Trek a good writing target for the minutia of human life is because they're living in this future utopia. I mean, it's not perfect, but they don't have money. They're on these nice, there's a federation of planets. People have like worked together. And there is this idea of like progressiveness baked in to what they're talking about, right? And I think that it might attract a certain kind of person, but it also, to me, makes it interesting to talk about like, oh, I bet you can still complain about your job, It hasn't changed that much. But, versus Star Wars, which is kind of like the world we live in today, not to get political, but I mean, there's oppressed people, there's powerful people, there's a fight going on. It kind of feels more similar to the modern world in a way.
Yeah. I think the biggest, well, even there's a religious aspect to it, right? With the Jedis. That's why I think Padme's line saying, this is how, liberty dies with thunderous applause. It resonates even now. That was 20 years ago. She said that. Still resonates to this day. And yes, I think people want that hopeful future that Star Trek does represent. And so that's, this is their holodeck fantasy. That is their escape. They're trying to escape just whatever's going on in their world. Now, speaking about the holodeck though, if you were ever in a holodeck, what would you do? Would you just be having fun on a starship, or would you go back to history? Like, how would you be using the holodeck program?
I think, well, of course, I'd think of many creative uses over the years, but I think the first thing that jumps to my mind is I have to link it to my passion of music. I'd have to go jam with some of the greats or watch some of the greats. And, when posed with a somewhat similar kind of time travel question in the past, I've always said something to the effect of I'd like to go to San Francisco in 1967 and just be a part of that scene. In a way, I think that's where my soul is. And it's what drew me across the country to move to San Francisco from my home on the East Coast. So, but I missed it, sadly. So that's probably where I'd go. I'd probably get on stage with the Grateful Dead or something like that.
Nice. I had asked this question with a friend of mine who does a podcast about Enterprise. And my thing was, I'm a huge Dodger fan. So sorry that you're in San Francisco, but I'm a huge Dodger fan, and I'm a huge fan of Jackie Robinson. And I would have loved to been in the seats when Jackie walked up on April 15th, 1947. Because that was a powerful moment, especially with the civil rights movement just starting right after that. So, again, not to get all political or, sappy or anything like that, but cool. I mean, that's always been my like huge thing. In my office, I have a giant photo of Jackie stealing home. And that's like the main photo in my office at work. Just because I'm a huge fan. Cool. I guess one thing I guess I was sad about though is that the Federation Starfleet is in San Francisco. I was pretty bummed about it.
Well, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. It's the seat of progressive politics.
I was like, gosh, dang it.
It does make a certain kind of sense. I don't live there anymore, for the record. I'm up in Sacramento with the Athletics these days. But
okay. Actually, my stepsister's up there, but she's a Dodger fan, so I'm like, be careful. I'm sure they made peace by the time the Federation came out. There, there's Dodgers and Giants fans all.
Everything's going to be solved by then, I hope. Yeah.
Pretty much, except for Cisco. He's very much Niners. I did like those little tidbits because, like, oh, Deep Space Nine, but then San Francisco. That was smart. Okay, I totally get that. Now, with the different characters of Star Trek, especially the Next Generation, I have to ask this question. But what is it, besides everything you had mentioned, what is it about these characters like Beverly Crusher, Troy, whatever, that you enjoy so much?
I think, I think it comes from we talked about the overarching philosophy of Star Trek, but specifically the philosophy put forth on the Enterprise of Next Generation via Captain Picard. Yeah, Captain Picard is my captain. He's the leader I want. I'll elect him president today, happily. I doubt that's ever going to happen, but he's kind of the philosopher king, right? And I just think that he is a very good model of how we should be coming to collaborative decisions. And all the characters, in a way, because they're there to work with him, I think are a reflection of that same kind of philosophy of collaboration, of hearing people out, of trying to problem solve through tough and nuanced problems in the best way they can. So to me, that just infiltrates the whole show. And, Patrick Stewart is the figurehead of that and the leader of that. But to me, it's reflected in every single character on the show. But that said, I think the show just does such a great job of developing every single character to the point where when you get to season 5, you probably don't even have to wait that long. You're starting to get these really interesting, Worf is playing towards type or he's playing against type, and you get all this different kind of interesting storytelling out of it. And so to me, it was just interesting to keep going with that. Like, for instance, we wrote a song on Enterprise. I wrote a song about Troy feeling like she is relegated because she's a woman and she wants to be thought of as someone who can be out in front and save the day and get more opportunities and not, just always be wearing low cut unitards on the show and things like that. And to me, that just feels real to me. I mean, I don't know what to say. I don't think she's totally disregarded or anything on the show or disrespected necessarily, but I do think that is something that her character might legitimately feel and want.
Yeah, I believe that. And I know they always gave him a hard time, but thank you, Captain Jellicoe. Because he got her in her uniform. I was all like, all right, he's a little bit of a hard ass, but it's fine. He knew what he was doing.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
He wasn't Picard, but he knew what he was doing. Now, you were on Captain's Quadrant not too long ago. I believe you guys were talking about Nemesis.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So how do you feel about how they did the movies versus how they did the next generation, like the TV show?
I kind of feel that the movies are fun. I think First Contact is easily the best one of them. Nemesis is not amazing, but it's okay. I mean, it's enjoyable, right? But I never thought they were able to really recapture the magic of even some of what they did in the 2-part episodes during this series itself. Maybe it has something to do with the budget or the expectation. I'm not exactly sure, but something about the small screen, to me, best of both worlds, where Picard becomes Locutus, for instance, sort of would have made a better movie inherently than Nemesis, for instance. But you get what you get, right? And I enjoyed watching them because I enjoyed the characters.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things, like you had just said not long ago, was that they utilized every single character to the best of their ability in the show. And it also highlighted Picard's character because you really couldn't have Picard without these other characters by his side. And I think the problem with the movies is that they highlighted Picard and Data too much. Like they were here and everyone else was down here. And so it didn't mesh well because it wasn't one, like the whole cast is one character in opinion. They all are, how do I put this? Like they're all just making each other better in a sense. And so when you're just focusing on 2 major characters, it kind of just feels flat, I think in Generations, I really did enjoy though when they destroyed the D, because that in itself was a character, and I felt like it was ending a chapter that's how the show was, and now they're moving on to the big screen. But I don't think it had that same magic that the E, that the D had in the E, and so it felt maybe too much of a kind of a yesterday's Enterprise, a warship, and just kind of going out and stuff like that. So it wasn't the same. And of course, I don't think Beverly was utilized very well.
No, now that you're saying it, you're sparking an idea, which is maybe it's about our shifting expectations for TV versus movies. Because the nature of the show, well, one thing, they did so many episodes of the show, 170 or ish.
78, something like that.
Yeah. And which means like they're going to naturally have to they've covered a lot of material, and they're gonna have to retread some of it. Oh, we found Data's head again on a planet. It's like I've seen that before. So there's going to be some of that, but also I think the show, because they had so many episodes per season, and because of the nature of a TV show, they were a little more willing to focus in and not have to make it a full ensemble storyline every single time. And that kind of served character development in a different way. So I don't know, it might sound a little, it's not exactly the opposite of what you're saying, but I just wonder if like our expectations are shifted with the big screen, and that plus they just had exhausted, fairly so, it had exhausted a lot of the possibilities of what the characters themselves could do.
Probably. I hate with a passion Insurrection. Hate. and the thing is that it's just a very long episodic episode. Like, it's just like, it's too much. And then we're not even going to start with the whole Picard love interest thing. Like, I'm a Donna Murphy, like, God bless her, but no. However, I sorta enjoyed Nemesis. They had a lot of problems, but I think that one had more of a collaborative feeling to it, where every character had its piece. It's still focused on Data and Picard, obviously, but each person had a role in some sense. Now, Troy getting mind raped again, not a fan.
Right, yeah, that's pretty.
One too many times. That was didn't
it's
like
one of the
that
cringiest moments of the series. Again, so why are you bringing it back?
Did you know there was 2 and they cut one out?
Really? 2 in the movie, you mean?
2 in the movie.
Oh
yeah, but they cut one out. And I was like, well, thank you. She gets mind raped in the turbo lift.
Jeez. Wow.
Which I don't think is as bad, though, as her getting mind raped in the middle of her honeymoon, but whatever. Again, didn't really think that through, I guess. I think with First Contact, I think what they did well was it because it did have that best of both worlds mentality, right? And in adding the Borg Queen and making it more scary and stuff. So I liked that aspect. And of course, I think Jonathan Frakes did a wonderful job. But Generations, I don't know, it was just maybe too focused on Picard, and maybe because of his family. It just didn't make sense. I was like, they burned Robert and Renee alive. Like, what is this? I mean, it was just kind of like, that's a lot.
Well,
but
you're also hitting on like the play to your strengths strategy. The best, the board came from Next Gen, and that's a great addition to the canon, right? And so it makes sense to try to leverage that. Yeah.
Though in Generations, like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed them destroying the D. But do you believe that Troy crashed it, or she saved everybody?
I'm going to choose to believe that she saved everybody.
Correct answer. No, I find it funny that people are like, oh, she crashed the ship twice. I was like, no, she didn't. Where in there did she crash the ship? The drive section blew up. It pushed the saucer section, and she steadied it enough to crash land.
I'm going to assume there's just some low-key misogyny at work there in that discussion.
A little bit. Of course, I tried to say she crashed in Nemesis too, and I was like, Picard gave her the order to crash into.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, they tend to forget. They tend to forget that little detail. So when Picard season 3 came out and she jumped up and swooped in to save the day, I was like, yes. I was like, thank you, Terry Metalis.
That's the kind of fan service I can really appreciate, for sure.
Right, Terry. And you could totally chime in with this one. I guess it's kind of part question and part me fangirling over here. But the one thing that I love about our current Trek is that it is created by fans, and they understand what the fans want. So like Mike McMahon with Lower Decks, Aaron Walke and the Hangman brothers with Prodigy, and of course Terry taking the helm for Picard season 3. They understand the assignment.
Yeah. They definitely do. And it's like, it's also, the media landscape has changed so enormously, in the time that Star Trek has been around, where like, how could you possibly not do it in conjunction with the community? The community is going to be so vocal. They're going to be able to make or break what you do. So it's, I'm hesitant to give too much credit because, like, how else could you possibly do it? Is what I want to say.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yes, it is. I do agree. It's been working really well, and I have enjoyed some of those new series much better. I felt like it lost its way for a little bit there.
Yeah. I think some people, like Picard, for instance, there was 3 different showrunners, right? So we
Yeah.
had Michael Chabon, we had Akiva Goldsmith, and Terry Matalas. And I thoroughly enjoyed season 1 of Picard. Not gonna lie, I thought it was really great. Kind of didn't like that they didn't even have maybe 1 or 2 characters. I mean, they had Riker and Troy for an episode, which was nice. But it was just showing the different side of Picard's life, which is totally fine. And I think Michael had an idea. Season 2, however, just went that way.
Yeah, that was a dip for sure. Yeah.
Major dip. That was far off into left field, into the parking lot. Like, it was very much where I was like, okay, I don't know where they're going. And I think he really wanted it to be different and very sci-fi, which he accomplished. And of course, COVID didn't help. And that's why they were very limited to just doing, being in 2024. But when season 3 came out, it was like, okay, this isn't just nostalgia. This is history, right? This is part of their story. And the way he paved through it, I was all like, very, very well done. I thoroughly enjoyed that.
No, I totally agree. Season 3 was very satisfying. I mean, I think the other thing that's going on now that we're in this world of media IP universes, let's say Marvel, Star Wars, etc., Star Trek was in the forefront of that. And yet they weren't leveraging it in the exact same way because every series would be distant in time from the previous. And they'd have these connections. They have these echoes of characters, even with something like The Next Generation. You're echoing characters from the original series, of course. But what I guess what I'm noticing is that what Marvel and Star Wars are doing, or have been doing in part, when I think they succeed is when they are willing to tonally change how a certain film should be. You watch a movie like, what was the one that Andor is based on? It's slipping from
Rogue
me.
One.
Rogue One, yes, but it was like a war movie, right? It had a different tone than Star Wars had. And sometimes when you're trying to rehash the exact same tone, that's where the fans kind of lose you. So it is. I appreciate that it is a hard line to walk. And Star Trek has way less experience with taking the same characters and the same ensemble and then trying to figure out if they should do more of the same or change it up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it is a definite gamble because I know a lot of people, like Larry mentioned this a lot, where some people didn't like season 3 because they said, oh, it was just full of nostalgia. They brought back the D, they have the old cast. It was just nostalgia. And he's like, no, this is history. They're part of the story. And this is just showcasing them after 20 years. So, and yes, bringing back the D was a fan service in a sense, but it also made sense to the story. They needed an analog ship that wasn't attached to the system. So it totally made sense to why they did that. And also please the fans that enjoyed that. I mean, I saw, grown men cry when the D popped up, and it's a beautiful thing because that ship and this cast means so much to them for whatever reason while they were kids. And that I think is what Terry captured. And in a sense that some of the new shows like Strange New Worlds and even Prodigy, when they brought Wesley back, I mean, I was losing my mind. I think I was watching like a football game and my team was winning. I was jumping up, I was screaming. And I've only been a fan for 3 years. Like, can you imagine the Wesley Crusher fans who there's a minority because there are always bad things said about Wesley and stuff like that. And so they must have felt so validated at that point. And I felt so great for Will Wheaton. Like, so I was like, he's deserved this.
Oh, totally. I'm surprised it took this long too, because he's kind of the internet's favorite nerd also.
He is. I know. And the thing is, when I first started, I heard a lot of crap. Like they were saying like, oh, a lot of people didn't like Wesley. I was like, why? Because he was smart. Well, no wonder there's kids that were like not feeling too great about themselves, because if you're saying this kid is smart and they don't like him, well, then that's kind of going to hurt some other kids who probably were just as smart as Wesley and didn't want to expose themselves because they didn't want people to not like them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair.
So, you know, it's just one of those things where it's just, it all comes together. But like now that we're adults and things, and especially Will Wheaton, like he cares about this character so much and happy to be back, especially in animated form. And then the reunion between Beverly and Wesley, I just,
yeah,
that was it.
great.
That was it. That was over.
You spend so much time with these characters, you want to see, you know, you want to check in with them. You want to see their emotional journey, and you want to see some kind of closure, extra pieces of their story. I mean, I'm just a simple person who just, I guess I can't even imagine having criticism of things like Picard season 3. It was just a fun time. It was just fun.
Right. But anyways, before we finish this, I'm going to get into my redhead alert. All right. So the only thing I have to share with you guys is my Patreon shout out. So my Starfleet Commander patrons is Chuck, Leslie, and Dave. And my Admiral patron is Engineer Mark. So thank you so much for your support. If you want to support Crusher Convo, just head over to patreon.com/Crusher Convo. And you can join for as low as $3 a month. And my apologies if you're hearing chewing in the background. That is Tigger the rabbit. Apparently, I forgot to give. He's just chewing on his box right now. So sorry for the AMSR. Is that what? Or ASMR? There we go.
ASMR, yeah.
There you go. That's for you guys. Unfortunately, guys, I don't know what next week is because we're pre-recording this. Next episode is, but I'm sure it's good. Okay. And I know I'm going to be sitting down though with my friend Jay, who hasn't been on the show for quite some time. So can't wait to bring him back. But I did it last episode, even though I haven't done last episodes yet, but it's fine. We're in the future. It's okay.
Yeah, we're jumping all around. Yeah. That's the nature
We're jumping all around.
the universe.
It's Star Trek.
Yeah.
But you know what, Rob? Please let the listeners, I could speak, please let the listeners know where they can find you and also anything that you want to plug.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jesse. Well, the Beverly Crushers are available on all streaming services, Spotify, YouTube, Apple, you name it. And we're also selling our vinyl records and a bunch of cool, unique t-shirts, as well as CDs and other stuff. And you can also stream over at Bandcamp. And you can check us out at the Beverly Crushers on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I love talking Trek with you, and I love that your band is named after my favorite character.
Thank you so much.
I had lots of fun. So yeah, guys, hit them up. You will not be disappointed. Their music is a lot of fun. I played the whole album in one fell swoop while I was editing. It's one of those chill music with the headphones, just like he was talking about. So
awesome. Thank you.
Anyways, but yeah, thanks guys. Until next time, live long and prosper. Live long and prosper. Bye guys.
Crusher out.